Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. This live stream is called Resilience 2.0, starring Stephanie Mitchell Hughes, you'll see beside me. And we talk about things that really cause people, often in our kind of age group, and particularly women, to give pause as they find themselves getting through those hard places, coming out the other side and remaining resilient. Now, we are at a point in time, I believe, where resilience is necessary. And Stephanie, I'm going to toss the ball to you. There are things that are happening in your own life now, which is calling upon you to find inner strength and resilience that perhaps you never had to call on before, and all around you. And let us not forget, and I'm going to wish everybody out there happy Juneteenth. This is an auspicious time anyway, with combined with the maelstrom that is American politics at the moment. Not a political show, so we're not really going to touch upon that. But let's talk about your own personal resilience story right now. What is it that's causing you pause right at this moment?
Well, okay, so everyone, I don't know if people have been following me, you know that my brother died. He was my only sibling. My brother died in 2024, and my dad died in 2020. And so now it is just me and my mother. And my mother lives in a different city from me. And I now go to visit her a lot more since my brother died. She is 89 years old now, and she still lives on her own. And I go visit her a lot. I take her to all of her appointments. I do all of these things. Well, I started noticing a few things going on with my mom that gave me pause. And I took her to the doctor, and there were a number of tests that were run, and including an MRI, which she had last week.
Right.
Last Friday. And so I found out on Monday. I have not told my mother this, but I found out on Monday that the MRI that she had of her brain showed that she had an old stroke. That revealed an old stroke. And the doctor's note said that it was probably asymptomatic and did not have any impact on her neurological abilities due to because of the thing, any such in a way that she would have noticed.
Right.
It also revealed vascular dementia. And her doctor said that she would probably need 24/7 home health care going in very short order.
Yeah, I'm very sorry, Stephanie.
I mean, it's tough. It's very, very tough because my mom is a tough person. She's not a person who complains. She powers through. And I know that she is grieving. Everyone in my family is still grieving my brother's death. I know that has had an impact on all of us, especially my mother. And there are hard questions that are out there. And the other thing that hangs just as a specter over me is this idea that I will, in a very short period of time, in all likelihood, be the only person in my family of origin left. And that is daunting to me. It was already daunting when my brother died, because when my brother died, because he and my mom, my brother's family, they all live in the same city. My brother and my sister-in-law live less than 10 minutes from where my parents live. And so I didn't see this happening in my brother dying at the time that he did. And that just wasn't on my radar. And the other thing is that I always felt that my brother was much better. He and my sister-in-law were better able to talk to my mom and really help her along the way. I tend to go in. Anyone who knows me knows I have a strong personality. I'm very task oriented, and I'm just like, okay, this has to be done, and this is what we need to do, and let's go and get this done. And
Right.
they take a different sort of an approach. And most of the time, that is very effective, and that really speaks to my mother. But the thing that I did not know until my mother fractured her sacrum a few years ago is that, and my sister-in-law told me this, she says, Mark will not make your mom do anything that she doesn't want to do. So if she tells my brother, oh, I don't want to do something, it really doesn't matter how significant, important, necessary it is. He just won't say, well, you have to do this.
Right.
Whereas I will say, I'm sorry that you don't want to do it. Now let's go because we need to get this done. And so she deserves somebody with a softer side. And I just am a porcupine.
I never perceived you as a porcupine.
I can be a porcupine. And I would never ever like disrespect my mother or lose my temper with her or anything. But, you know, I also have, because of my experience of being a solo parent, of having early on, my kids and I, we moved like every year for 7 years. And so when you move like that, you're used to purging and not holding on to a lot of stuff and clearing things out and all of that. You get into a rhythm of doing that. But I want to get back to the whole thing with my mom.
Okay.
And so for me, I thought about this and I've thought all this week, well, how am I supposed to tell my mother? She's going back to the doctor on Monday, and I guess the doctor will have a conversation with her. You know, I do have people who I'm working on getting people to support her and to hire to take care of my mom, to provide support for her. That's even tough because she doesn't want people who she doesn't know in her house. And I get all of that. But it is a very tough thing, this prospect of loss upon loss upon loss upon loss. And June is a tough month for me and other people and other members of my family anyway, because my uncle, my mother's brother, died in June. My aunt, who was married to my uncle, died in June. My dad died in June. And the list just goes on and on and on. They're not the only deaths, but it's just a lot. One of my very best friends, her mother died in June. And the thing that I have to always come back to, as I've thought about this and how it is that I'm going to navigate things going forward, is to recognize and understand that this is just part of the circle of life.
Um,
It's just part of the circle of life. It is part of my experience, part of my journey.
it's the final chapters of your mother's life, and it's the mid chapters of yours, and it's. I don't think there's any way it could be painted as anything other than uncomfortable, and a process that is.
You know, it is uncomfortable and it is tough. And my goal is to make certain that my mother is comfortable, that she is safe, that she is well cared for.
Right.
I brought her to where I live thinking, okay, well, maybe I can have her stay with me. But then I realized when she was here that her needs are more than what I can handle on my own.
Well,
That I will
and
need some
to
assistance.
clarify that
Mhm.
you don't live on the first floor. You live higher than that. So she would
Mhm.
always and negotiating stairs is hard.
Well, it's going
For
to
her,
be. It's going to be difficult because,
and
she
it
has
will
a
get harder.
walker. She uses a walker. And I've noticed like that whole thing where like, when she made that shift from 88 to 89, and then it was kind of like she kind of took a left, so to speak. And
Yeah.
I'm just going back and thinking about conversations that I've had with her and when I've had them that seemingly at the time didn't make a lot of sense. And I don't want to, she's not incoherent. I just talked to her about an hour ago and we had a conversation, and she's aware of, for the most part, still aware of what's going on. Um, but it is just that time, the time where we have to stand and remind ourselves this is the time for courage.
This is the hardest time for courage as well, because oftentimes you have to summon up courage to achieve a certain goal, or
Mm-hmm.
you have to summon up courage to make an approach to something that you've been putting off. But this is something that you don't know how long it's going to last.
Mm-hmm.
Not wishing it to be any shorter than it has to be. But
Well,
but more importantly,
mm-hmm.
you don't know what parts of your soul you're going to have to dig out to cope with it. Frankly,
But see then, so okay, so this is the thing, Gareth, for me. There are a couple of things. So when find myself in this type of a situation where I'm approaching something and I find myself in a real difficult, something that I know is going to be really tough and
right,
really hard. I
right,
have to always ask myself, hold myself accountable by saying, now, do you believe everything that you have said about a hard place in life? Everything that you have written, because if you don't believe it, and you're not going to walk in it, then you need to go sit down in a corner because you're just doing more harm than good. I
right.
don't do any of this for fame, fortune, or any of it. I just do it because life can be tough. It will knock you down, and sometimes you're flat out on the ground. And I just want people to know that you're not the only person out there struggling and dealing with something, but you can get up. But the other thing is that on the other side of this, hard places and tough situations, they challenge you, they pull you, they teach you compassion, teach you patience, teach you lessons, empathy, teach you all of the things, grace, how to extend grace, how to extend mercy, all of those things. Those things are important. Contrary, it seems as if, particularly right now in the United States, we are living in this time where people feel, where force and unkindness and meanness and people being at each other's throats, arguing, people being disrespectful to each other, calling people names, arguing, yelling, places, and just really showing out that those things are strength. I'm going to bully you into submission. I'm going to bully you into accepting my position, thinking like me, acting like me. I'm going to shove you down. I've got to force. It does in my opinion, and everything that I have learned from life, showing grace, extending grace, mercy, compassion,
Right.
patience, all of those things are hard to do because oftentimes you're not being called upon to do those things, to demonstrate any of that in a really easy, straightforward, it's the circumstances are really hard because it would be easier for me to push people out of the way. So, and so I guess the other part of it is that I am navigating this personal, very deeply personal, and trying not to cower in the face of it. But I'm dealing with all of this in the midst of a tremendous amount of chaos, confusion, pain, um, that's happening in the United States. What
Yeah.
appears to be a complete shredding and ripping apart institutions that we are supposedly hold dear.
And rely on.
And we're supposed to, yes, exactly. I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. To me,
It's my belief that every citizen of the United States takes that oath and retakes it every morning.
well, and that's true. You take an oath to protect and defend. When as a lawyer, that meant something to me. When
Right.
I raised my right hand in May of 1989, along with however many other people, other lawyers, baby lawyers were with me, and that meant something to me. When my daughter was taking that same oath last month, and I just thought, does this mean anything anymore? Should I weep, at hearing that? But we just have a lot of uncertainty happening in the United States right now. I think that there's some people who are terrified. Some people don't care because they feel like it doesn't apply to them. It doesn't affect them. That's their problem, not my problem. We're all human beings. We all live on this earth. What is it that Martin Luther King said? We will either live together peacefully as men or die as fools. I think I'm paraphrasing.
No, but that's pretty close. And I'll tell you what, he was on the money. He was on the money. I mean, people are going to call me an idealist or an idiot, but this is going to sound really weird. So please bear with me.
Okay.
Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry was, in some ways, he was a bit of an idiot himself, but his whole ethos was that everyone of every race, color, creed uh, should have an equal ability to get to the top of whatever it was there was. So, a black person could be president, quite right. A white person could shine your shoes. It wouldn't matter. Everyone would have the same, what Australians refer to as having a fair go. They would
Mm-hmm.
have the same ability to achieve. It was in his fantasy landscape. It was all a meritocracy, and it didn't matter what your race or your bloodline was. And I thought we were getting there. And with the current administration, it feels like both over here and over at your the other side of the pond, it feels like they're taking us back at least 50, if not 100 years. And I just can't we just. This is going to sound terrible, but can't we just get on? Can't we just find a way to work
Well,
together?
I mean, I think that it just kind of goes back to sort of where we started with this conversation. The thing I remember in times like these, I always have to go back to my faith. That is the beginning and the ending point for me. But the other thing that I have to reflect upon is what my ancestors, bodies that people did to survive all of the incredibly cruel and unrelenting institutions, be it slavery, Juneteenth. It took until June 19th for slaves in Texas to learn that slavery was no longer legal
And
in
that they
the
were free,
United States.
and they were free people. They were free men and
Yes,
women.
at least on paper.
Yeah,
At least on paper.
and it's still,
But, but
to this day. There's an unseen undertow of segregation, even though supposedly it's no longer a thing.
well, but
Uh,
the other thing though is that I think about Jim Crow, and I had ancestors who had to survive and navigate that, and the Depression, the wars, survive and do and get through all of that. And so I am rooted in people. My origin is planted in people who have had to navigate something, navigate tremendous hardship, navigate real significant financial unfairness, discrimination, all types of indignities and injustice,
right.
all of those things. And I believe that we will come out of this and hopefully learn some lessons
Oh,
that stop
please.
us from having to continue to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Because you had slavery, you had the Civil War. There are some who argue that there are people who've never gotten over losing the Civil War and changing a particular region of this country's way of life.
Right.
Um, but that's why you have to have courage. That's why you have to stand firm. You have to have courage. And it doesn't mean that you go back out, that you just keep pushing yourself forward. That's not what resilience in this context and in the season that we're in right now. That's not what resilience means, in my opinion. I think that resilience means recognizing and understanding that this is going to take some courage, it's going to take a lot of work, and pushing and learn to push back, if not both figuratively and literally, but also taking a break and resting and gathering yourself, and also knowing which battles are yours and which ones are not.
I think that's critical. It's about
Right,
knowing which are your battles to fight.
right.
Uh, and
Because all of it, because you know what, Gareth, everything that is happening right now doesn't necessarily have to do with Black people,
no,
or it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Black people of African descent. It doesn't have anything to do with that. This lesson is not necessarily ours to learn. We've seen it before, but the lessons that are going to come out of it are not necessarily ours to learn because we've already learned them. And we keep telling people, but they don't listen.
well, that is the generational issue, I think. And on that note, I think I'm going to call it a whole. But I just want to say to everyone out there, and once again, happy Juneteenth. I see you. We see you. This is a celebration that at least the initial emancipation took place on the 19th of June. And I guess this kind of resilience is showing up, doing the work, avoiding the battles that are not yours, and just plow forward. And thank you so much for being there to help me understand more about what's involved and why it is what it is, Stephanie. And to all of you out there, try and keep your feet on the ground. Try and keep reaching for the stars, but please try and look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye now.
Bye.